We've got the Ohio River Valley covered with your country favorites, local news, and local sports on 95.3 WIKI Carrollton, Madison.
The following program is paid for by the Rick and Rick at Night Show.
This is Rick and Rick at Night. We're the voice of liberty here in the Ohio River Valley. I'm Rick Roos. My partner Rick Berry and I are delighted to be here once again, albeit on a kind of a somber note, not only the election, but the events in Connecticut. How are you, Bulldog?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I wrote myself a note that just to start things off, let's remember the people in Newtown, Connecticut, not only the families and the victims, but everybody that lives there, and everybody across the nation this morning, the deaths of those fine, innocent people a couple days ago.
We'd like to shout out to and express our true thanks to our friend Doc and DuPont and so many others who have served our country so valiantly and worn the uniform of our country so well. We've got kind of a hybrid show. We've got a call-in guest, and so we've got a number to call in for the first half of the show. And Rick, you want to give that as well as introduce our guest?
That number will be 801-3064. That's area code 812-801-3064. And because of the setup, Rick, since we have a call-in guest, those questions will be taken by Lisa. And then Lisa will forward your question on to us, and then we can forward that on to our guest as we move along.
You want to introduce our guest?
Oh, I thought you had more. Usually you have about a 10-minute introduction, Rick. And Father Charles, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm going to give a little intro here, and we'll get going. Our guest tonight is Father Charles Sikorsky. Father Charles is the president of the Institute for Psychological Sciences in Arlington, Virginia. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, Father Charles graduated from Johns Hopkins University and the University of Maryland Law School. He practiced law in the state of Maryland prior to his entry into the seminary and was ordained a Catholic priest in the year 2002. Father, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Rick. Good to be with you.
Well, I want to get started. About a year ago, the Catholic leadership sent out a letter for all the priests to read to their congregation, railing against the Obamacare mandate and its contraceptive and abortifacient coverage. And here we are a year later, and Catholics still voted in the majority for President Obama, and we're all a little mystified and thought maybe we'd start things off getting your opinion on what happened there.
Well, I think that we're all mystified to a certain degree, but I think what it comes down to is being a faithful Catholic. We can say so many different things, but if people don't really truly believe faith and want to live their faith, then you're going to get results like we got. And I think the crisis right now in the church is as many people consider them were baptized, but have not aren't living their faith or have not been properly formed in their faith. And and we all have to, I think, as a church, it's time to really examine our consciences. Are we all doing what we should have been doing, or what we should be doing to spread the faith, to help people understand what the church teaches and why, and really spread Jesus Christ among ourselves? We can get complacent, we can fall into routine, and I think that there's a big problem within the church in that regard, and we become passive in many ways. So it's I think it's an opportunity. We really have to sit down and think, what have we been doing wrong as leaders in the church to see this kind of a result?
Father, in my opinion, the way I look at it is one step down a terrible road that we're heading, and I don't want to prop myself up as some kind of great Catholic, because I'm not. And I would say here to the listeners, there's probably Catholics out there that voted for President Obama that in many ways are a better Catholic than I am. And I know them. I know a lot of them. But it was also about a year ago that Pope Benedict wrote to the American Roman Catholic Church that they needed to understand the grave threats posed by what he called radical secularism in politics and culture. The pontiff specifically mentioned the U.S. Church struggling to be permitted conscientious objection to intrinsically evil practices. So this kind of followed up the letter to the parishioners, and our father, or my priest in my church, Father Chris Craig, he was a real trooper. He mentioned the importance to vote for the right people, vote your conscience as a Catholic during this past year. So I was thinking the whole time that, that the Catholics were just going to blow President Obama out of the water. And when that didn't happen, it really, like we said, mystified us as to what's really going on in this country. And what do we need to do to bring this back? I mean, if this keeps going the way it's going, it doesn't bode well for our country or our faith.
It certainly does not. I think the first step, as you may know, this year Pope Benedict has called for a year of faith in the entire church throughout the world. And I think first thing, we have to go back to basics. We have to first of all learn our faith, but also see faith has two aspects to it. One is the doctrine and content of the faith, which those things we're to believe. But the other part is living that faith, the theological virtue of a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think we really need to start there. We need to be living our faith in order to really make a difference in our culture. Archbishop Charles Chaput from Archdiocese of Philadelphia wrote an article shortly after the election. He was talking about religious freedom. And one of the things he said is that, just to put it bluntly, if people don't believe in God, religious liberty is not a value. And one of the things that really struck me election night, watching the results, one of the channels, they mentioned that there was a recent survey, and for the first time ever in the United States, over 20% of the people said that they had no religious affiliation at all. I mean, they did not consider themselves a member of any particular denomination or a religion or anything, and that was the highest it's ever been. And when you have that such a large number of the people believing that or not believing that, or in that situation, you end up with, I guess what we a lot of people have. I think people start to look to the state and to government as the be-all, end-all, the source of our rights, the source of benefits and so forth, of our sustenance. They look there for security instead of God. And I think that's the problem. We need to all, in our own churches, and first of all in our own lives, but then in our local areas, to really take our faith seriously, learn it, love it, live it, and help to spread it.
Father Charles, this is Rick Roos. I'm the taller Lutheran version of the Rick and Rick show. So we've got an interdenominational thing going on here. What do you understand to be the crux of the not a disagreement, but the struggle between the Catholic as well as some of the Protestant churches and Obamacare?
Okay, well, I think there maybe, I would say there are two parts to it. First, we have this specific HHS mandate that was done last year, which requires all insurance policies to include contraceptive, sterilization, and abortifacient pills that cause abortions, in their coverage. And they made one very, very narrow exception for churches. But the exception is so narrow that virtually very few places would Jesus Christ wouldn't qualify, actually, because you need to serve only those people in your particular denomination. So if a Lutheran church had a soup kitchen and they didn't, card people at the door to make sure they were Lutherans, well, then that soup kitchen would not qualify for that exemption. So this mandate applies not only to it applies to so many the churches themselves, because the Catholic Church, for example, well, we don't check people's religious identity before we serve them in our hospitals, schools, and so forth. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is just the whole idea of what this law will do on the issue of life. It doesn't require specifically abortion to be covered. But just the whole idea of eventually having to ration care would certainly create situations down there that aren't hard to imagine, whereby, well, it'd be cheaper just to have an abortion, so that becomes the standard practice, or it'll be cheaper to the older folks' end-of-life decisions to really, cause the government to ration care to where we're going to say, okay, if you're that old, you had a nice life, and this operation you need is so expensive, we really can't give it to you. So you end up functionally having euthanasia. Those are real risks, I think, created by the Obamacare law.
Father, this is Rick Berry again. Is it true that, so along that same line, like Catholic hospitals, in order to avoid the mandate, they would have to only admit Catholics as patients? Is that correct?
Well, that's yes. They wouldn't be able to. One of the criteria is that even if it's a church-run institution, yes, it would have to be primarily for members of your particular religious faith.
And that's just not going to happen, is it? I mean that we have 200 years of history of Catholic, or probably more than that, of Catholic charities taking everybody in. I mean, that's part of our Catholic faith. So we're kind of in a box here as to what's going to happen. And I know Cardinal Dolan has said that if we cannot get this mandate rule changed, that we will begin to shut down Catholic institutions. I hope that doesn't come to that, but do you have any inside knowledge on that particular stance of Cardinal Dolan?
Well, I think they're serious. I think this is an unprecedented moment in church-state relations in the United States, and really we cannot, as believers, do the things that the government wants to mandate through this. Despite recent disappointments in the election and in the Supreme Court case, I do think there's a really good chance that the mandate will be struck down in the courts. But you never know. It may not hold up, or it may be held up rather, and then we'd have to make that choice. And I think that would happen. Yes, I think certain Catholic institutions and other Christian institutions would have to make that decision. I think a lot of them would have to shut down.
This is Rick and Rick at Night. We're the voice of liberty here in the Ohio River Valley. We're talking to Father Charles Sikorsky of the Institute for the Psychological Sciences in Alexandria, Virginia. And Father, the ethical, the moral dilemma, I mean, does the Catholic Church, and I know you can't speak for the whole Catholic Church, could that not be a motive of the Obama administration, is to shut down religious hospitals, healthcare providers? I mean, you hate to think of the worst, but my dad was in a POW in World War II, and I'm sitting there going, we had another bunch of folks that like to push religions around to their whims.
Well, I tell you, this is my personal opinion. I don't speak for the church on this, but from what I know about the president and read about him, his philosophy, his political philosophy, is one that is certainly favors the government providing solutions to social problems and to even things that otherwise could be handled by charities and so forth. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if he really did want to he wants to control everything, and that could be a possible motive. Now, it would be, given the fiscal situation in the country right now, it seems absolutely insane for him to want to do that, given that all of a sudden the government would have to take on more and more responsibilities for things like hospitals and certain schools and so forth. But they've really dug in on this, and I think we're in uncharted waters. And I have a fear that he may be perfectly happy with that.
Well, Father, what you're talking about too is so many times in the last 4 years, I thought that President Obama was committing political suicide by some of the things he did. And sadly, everything he seems to have done that I thought was going to destroy him has ended up working out in his favor. And like you said, that's the scary part. It seems like, and even my fellow Catholics who probably are big fans of his, they just don't seem to grasp the reality of what is happening, not only to our country, but to our church.
I agree. I was very surprised. I thought that possibly, I thought this mandate would help the income. And I thought possibly if, as the election day grew closer, and the polls were very close, going in those last few weeks, that he might just reverse the mandate to help, diffuse a little bit that issue.
I think against Senator McCain, President Obama won 54% of the Catholic vote, and this time he won 51%. I mean, we did make a little bit of a dent, but 3%. I was thinking it was going to end up being like 65-35 or 60-40. So I was just stunned that he actually did get a majority of Catholics to vote for him. Stunned and terrified at the same time.
Yes, it was. I think some people they don't. A lot of this. Well, the Obamacare law really doesn't go into effect until 2014. Even this mandate, they've delayed it at least for a year or so for Catholic and Christian institutions. And so people may be thinking, well, that's never going to happen, and cooler heads will prevail or something. But they really haven't experienced all the consequences of what this can and will do. The press secretary, Jay Carney, was quoted as saying that he thought they had come up with a good balance, a good compromise, but I don't see where the White House has compromised at all with the Catholic faith in the Obamacare bill. But Jay Carney said that they found a good middle ground. And do you know what that middle ground was? Well, and the bishops, Cardinal Dolan spoke out quickly after that was, now they tried to, this is maybe last February, they tried to tweak the regulations, say, well, your policies have to require it, but the insurance companies don't have to charge you for it, so you're not actually going to pay for it. And the response is, well, that just doesn't happen. It all gets factored into the cost of the policy.
It really did. It really didn't mean anything, did it?
That's what it was. Yeah.
Well, and that concession too. I mean, that was this administration's renowned for its hubris, but to sit there and say the Catholic Church, okay, if we don't have to pay for it, we're good with it. No, this is a moral decision. This is not just a fiscal consideration, and I mean, that's just. I'm sorry, boys and girls.
Right.
We got some problems.
I think you're right, again, this is unprecedented. In the United States, we've usually, or till now, a lot of the religious freedom disputes have always been about, well, you want to put the nativity scene on public property, or is the government going to subsidize religious schools and things, which. I think there's a constitutional argument in favor of that this is a public good, and if you do it without discriminating against one religious group, that would be fine. But that's a whole different class of religious freedom legal dispute, if you would, than the government forcing you to do something that clearly violates your beliefs in a very fundamental way, and to the point where it's something you just can't do. That's never happened in the United States.
What allies does the Catholic Church have right now? I know that the bishops haven't done the suit, but I believe that the Catholic Church through other venues have done. Have you got other allies out there?
Yes, there are. There are definitely several other Christian institutions who've joined in lawsuits and who've been supportive. But I think they see, maybe the particular church doesn't necessarily have the same teachings on contraception and so forth. However, they see the principle is, well, if you can make the Catholic Church do this, well, then they can come and force our church to do something else that violates our beliefs. Once you establish that principle, there's no, it's a legal principle that's applied in the future. And so the precedent is very dangerous. There are, I give you specific names, I don't have them off the top of my head, but several other groups have been supportive, and I think it behooves people of other faiths, whether they're Protestant faith or Jewish or whatever, to understand this principle. This can come back to bite everyone, and even on the issue even on the issue of, they get away, like the same thing would apply for, they're saying contraceptive, sterilization, and abortion pills. Well, the principle is if you can force someone to buy an abortion pill, why can't you force them tomorrow to pay for an abortion? So it's a very dangerous precedent.
And if it's a tax, they can, we've determined that it can be a tax. They can just about twist that into making us do anything. Now that Chief Justice Roberts determined that it could be a tax and move forward.
That's right. That's right.
It's convoluted,
Yeah,
Father Charles. But are you are you optimistic, pessimistic, or just waiting?
Well, I think we're sort of on uncharted waters. I'm optimistic. Cautiously optimistic that we can win this case in court, that it will be struck down. But now there's two scenarios here. One is as applied to church institutions, schools, hospitals, etc. I think there's a very good chance that will be struck down. But there's another part. There are lawsuits from private companies where you have that are owned by either Catholics or Christians who are also suing because they too have religious freedom, and they're being forced in their companies to have these insurance policies which violates their moral beliefs. That could be a little trickier. Some of the cases so far have gone maybe half and half from the decisions we've seen so far, but that's also a very important matter that's out there. So I'd probably be less optimistic on that. But hopefully this can be an opportunity for Christians and for the church for people to take a step back, think really seriously. What are our values as a nation? What are our values as a people? And do we want to break with the traditions that have served us so well over our country's history? And really, do we really want to go down this road? So hopefully it can be something that will cause a lot of people, both inside and outside of the church, to really reflect on who we are and who we want to be, and maybe get them more active in engaging our culture and helping to build a just society and to build Christ's kingdom here in the United States.
Father Charles, that does give me the opportunity. We do have a local company here in town called Grody Industries, and they're an automotive light manufacturer. And they are suing, it's owned by a group of brothers and their sons, all Catholic, all good Catholics, and they're suing the church, or suing the church. They're suing the government over Obamacare, and I'd like to give a shout out to them. There was a law professor at Notre Dame, and she wrote that it's the culture, stupid. We have been trying to fight this battle every 4 years at the voting booth, and it is long past time we admit that is not where the battle really is. We abdicated control of the culture starting back in the 1960s, and now our largest primary social institutions, education, the media, Hollywood, have become really nothing more than an assembly line for cranking out reliable little leftists. Furthermore, we have allowed the government to undermine the institutions that instill good character, marriage, the family, communities, schools, our churches. So here we are, at least 2 full generations later. We are reaping what we have sown. It took nearly 50 years to get here, and it will take another 50 years to get it back. But it starts with the determination to reclaim education, the media, and the entertainment business. If we do fail that, we can kiss every election goodbye from here on out, and much more. Father, we need another great awakening.
I can't disagree with that. I think that sums up where we are.
Absolutely.
We do. I mean, there's a tremendous need for evangelization, conversion, and for people out there of goodwill who might not agree with us to really sit down and think, where are we going with this? And what kind of people do we want to be? What are our values? And I think that whole process has to be. I mean, that's the real solution, because the election results usually only reflect generally what's going on in the culture.
Father, everybody out there that is for what is going on, somewhere along the line, they need to understand that this is going to work against them just as much as me and you standing here talking, that nobody's exempt from what's going to happen if we don't stop it. And hopefully by radio shows like this, by conservative media. Hopefully, eventually, we can get the word through to people. But I've had this argument with some of my liberal friends, and I tell you, it's maddening, and I'm sure you have too. They twist everything that's going on into the church being the one that's discriminating and not the government. And I'm sure you've heard the same argument, and it can drive you crazy.
Sure. Yeah, they've got it backwards. I mean, the church is not forcing anyone to not, we're not trying to outlaw contraception. That's preposterous. We are being forced to pay for things that go against our religious beliefs. That's the bottom line, and it's very clear. And so that's they can put all the spin they want, but that's the reality here. So.
Like I said, I've had that same argument with several times with people, and what is so cut and dry to me in my mind between right and wrong, they'll always come back and say, well, no, it's the church that's discriminating against women. And I think, oh, my God. And that'll go back and forth for 15 minutes, and finally you just throw your hands and you say, I give up.
Well, what's our most famous Catholic university in the country, University of Notre Dame, dedicated to the Blessed Mother. So we honor women, and we do everything we can to protect them. And I think if you really want to take a serious and mature look of it, I think that the church has stood up for women more than probably any other institution in the world. So.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've got one more question for you, Father, and this is because you're in the Beltway there. I love Washington, D.C. It's my favorite place in the world to be. But it's kind of a quagmire at times. And there was a Washington Post article where Nancy Pelosi, who's currently the minority leader of the House, was quoted as saying, and this was about a Protect Life Act. And we're going to catch it because we're supposed to be a Tea Party. We can't talk about social issues, but it's okay with us that we do that. But they were talking, she was quoted, she said, this Protect Life Act amounted to letting hospitals say to a woman, I'm sorry you could die if you don't get an abortion. That those who dispute that characterization may not like the language, but the truth is what I said. I'm a devout Catholic and I honor my faith and love. But they, the Catholics, have this conscience thing. How do you deal with Catholics like that, Father? It amazes me. I mean, we do the same thing with Lutheran Church, but I'm just sitting there going, these people speak out of both sides of their mouth, and yet they espouse that they're part of the church.
It's hypocrisy. You may have after the vice presidential debate, Joe Biden, you may remember, said that that was totally false. That the government, the administration, was not forcing the church to pay for contraceptions or abortions. And the next morning, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a press release very early, taking him to task for that. God respects our freedom, and that includes the freedom to be an unfaithful Catholic. And what do you do about that? I don't know. I think that the way to do it is just proposing the truth, explaining the truth, so that people hear what the church actually teaches and why. And I find that most people are able to see through that. They're much more likely to listen to a faithful member of the church, whether it be a priest or a layperson, than they would to a politician who obviously has, other interest in mind when they make statements about the faith.
Father Charles, is the church? Are we kind of at a kind of wait and see mode right now, or are we on the attack? Unfortunately, I can say that I'm not totally up to date as to what's going on. I know these mandates are really starting to come full force here in the next several months. What exactly is the church doing right now as far as that goes?
Right, there are I'd say there are dozens of lawsuits pending right now. The mandate will not go into effect for I believe it's August.
I think it's August of next year, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, August of next year. That the president graciously allowed us, as Cardinal Dolan said, a year to figure out how we would violate our consciences.
I hate to laugh.
It was probably an election-related kind of thing, so that that you wouldn't have this going on before the any particular conflicts.
Right.
But so I know the Archdiocese of New York, for example, Archdiocese of Washington, many institutions of higher education are in court right now, and I you just have to wait for the court process to go through. In the meantime, I think public awareness of the issue, shows like this are a great service for people to understand what's actually going on and what this actually means. Maybe with the so many different things they speak about in the political campaign, that people didn't really focus on this. So if we can draw attention, I think there are a lot of good people, goodwill out there, whether they're liberal or conservative, who are troubled by this. And I think the more we can bring about awareness of that, perhaps that can help put pressure on Congress or to do something, or even the administration to rescind the order. Because the president can. This is not like a law that needs to be approved by the House or Senate. This is just an executive order. The president can change this anytime he wants. He could rescind it.
Well, Father, that and a lot of prayer and a lot of champions like you stepping up to get the word out. Hopefully in the next couple of years we'll see a big change. I know, Rick, I think my partner here, Rick Roos, may have another question for you. We're probably going to wind down here because we got another guest coming on. Rick, do you have anything else?
I think you answered him, Father. We just really appreciate you being on the show, and we know God's in control, and we as a nation's got to turn back to Him, because we're floundering right now, at least the electorate. But we do appreciate you being on the show, Father, and Merry Christmas to you.
Likewise to both of you. Thank you very much, and you keep up the great work with all you're doing.
Father Charles Sikorsky of Arlington, Virginia, not Alexandria, like my partner falsely stated. It's so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can do it again.
I hope so. That'd be great.
This is Rick and Rick at Night, the voice of liberty here in the Ohio River Valley. And I wrote down the wrong. It's close to Alexandria. It's close to Alexandria.
Anytime I can get a dig on you, I'm going to do it. You know that.
We're going to have a mercenary little timeout here, touting 2 books that we want you to put underneath your Christmas trees in a week. Greetings, Patriot. I'm Rick Roos of the Rick and Rick at Night radio show. I've put together a book about our historic leader, Barack Hussein Kardashian Obama. This book is unique as it's a word search puzzle book, a seek and find of his many egregious and preposterous quotations and scandals. It's $10, tax included. This collection is available at obamacodebook.com or Amazon or anywhere fine books are found.
Greetings, Patriots. This is Rick Berry of the Rick and Rick at Night radio show. We would like to recommend Dave Bego's new book, The Devil at Our Doorstep, exposing the real agenda of big labor and the taking of American freedoms. Dave wrote this book to shed light on the brutal tactics used by labor unions such as the SEIU, whose close ties to President Obama and his administration have proven costly to businesses and employees across the country. This administration's rule by regulation mentality has weakened the economy, leaving business owners unsure of their future and put employees in the crossfire while eroding American freedoms. The Devil at Our Doorstep is a must-read, containing important insight for the future of America and detailing why the November election is the most important in our nation's history. The paperback edition is available at Amazon.com for $10.76, and limited edition hardcover copies are available for $20 on the website, thedevilatourdoorstep.com. We are at a crossroads, and as Americans, we must wake up and fight to save our freedoms and our future before it's too late. Thank you.
Again, this is Rick and Rick at Night, the voice of the liberty here in the Ohio River Valley. This is a conversation we hope you will join. Our local number is 812-574-0953 and toll-free 877-953-0953. We welcome your calls, and we'd ask that you give your first name and where you're calling from. We're also on the web at 953wiki.com. And we'd like to welcome the studio Pastor Mike Johnson of Cornerstone Baptist Church in Hanover, and he's been a dear friend of ours for several years now, and he's a man of faith and a man of principle, and we've also gotten his parents here in town They're part of our Tea Party as well. Welcome, Pastor.
Thank you, Rick. It's a joy to be here with you, and I appreciate you and Rick and your incredible stand and your tremendous courage to stand for religious freedom and for the issues that matter so much to me as a pastor and as a citizen. I appreciate you very much. The opportunity to be here. It's a joy.
Pastor Mike, Rick Berry here. We were really thrilled to get you on the show because obviously we had Father Charles Sikorsky on, and this is, mainly been trumpeted as a Catholic issue, but it's not really a Catholic issue. And I think the saying we've heard a lot from Protestant ministers is we're all Catholics now, and that's why you're here, and you understand what it means not only for the Catholic Church but for the Baptist Church and all the other churches too. Can you kind of expound on that a little bit as to what you fear for the future?
Certainly, as an evangelical pastor, as a independent Baptist, or we stand in solidarity with the Catholic Church and others who are fighting this monstrosity called Obamacare. We believe, and ever since I first learned about it, what was coming down the pipe, I felt that this would be a major affront to spiritual liberty and to the things that we stand for the most. And I think about, as a pastor, you think about your people and the burden that the federal government can put upon them. And as somebody who stands for life, and my stance for life is, I believe that life is sacred. I believe that life, of course, in the womb is sacred. And I think too, and I can't help but reflect on what's happened at Sandy Hook and the travesty of what's taken place there, the horrendous events, those precious 20 children. And I'm reminded, that here they are. People realize how precious these children are. With every face that comes over the TV, you see how beautiful, how wonderful, how precious these kids are, that their lives have been taken prematurely from them, 6, 7 years old, and these wonderful teachers, 6 teachers. And once again, it reminds me that, that's what we try to say. Life is precious, whether it's a living child, 6, 7 years old, or it's a child in the womb. That life is truly sacred. And so as a pastor, I really believe that this is something that all of us need to be involved in. As pastors, we need to be on the offensive, and we need to be very outspoken in helping our people to understand, what the electorate has decided upon, basically.
Well, 20 years ago, if you'd have said, 20 years from now, the government's going to tell the Catholic Church that they got to do this or they got to do that against their own religious doctrine and belief, people would have laughed and said, you're crazy. Now that that's happening, the problem is this is a Pandora's box of, this is just the beginning. I mean, once the government gets its tentacles into this, they can see that they can do this. I mean, it's scary to think what else they'll decide they can do, and then the Constitution basically is gone.
Absolutely, and I'm reminded about the case with Grace College and Seminary and Biola University. They have filed a lawsuit in August of this year, and it's with ADF, the Alliance for Defending Freedom. That's the organization representing them. And they, too, basically have stated in their own president, said government officials do not have the right to require religious organizations to act in a way contrary to their deeply held religious beliefs, nor to define what the free exercise of religion is. They've actually tried to redefine that. And they've, on top of that, determined that this college, Grace College, is not really religious enough to opt out. And so they all of a sudden are becoming the all-encompassing police force to determining who is a religious organization, who is not, and it will never stop when it comes to the federal government and the power that they have wielded through this. And it's just unbelievable to me to think about what's coming down the pipe. I've tried to get a handle on it to figure out, even with my own insurance man, what is coming down the pipe for us as Christians. And I have an individual, health policy through Anthem. What's going to happen with that? And in many cases, he said that what they're hearing is the costs are staggering, and basically the details are not all out there yet. But we know that it's going to be a very oppressive force for Christians and for us as pastors. And just the thought of having to accept this mandate. And know that this is so against everything we stand for. We believe that life is so sacred, and now I have to pay for these abortion induced drugs and so forth. And I just really believe that this is something that we all have to, as Christians, we really need to stand against.
It's a cultural decline. I mean, it's scary. I wanted to relay a story. I've told Rick, I went to visit a relative in Shadyside, Ohio with my family, and we went to the Catholic church that Saturday night, because Catholics they have Saturday night Mass. And I'm not kidding you, Mike, this was a couple years ago. Except for my brother, I was the youngest guy in that building, and at that time I was 55. I mean, everybody was elderly, and I looked around, and it's scary. And I thought maybe that's a microcosm of what's happening. Our kids are not going, or their parents are not going. Their parents are not taking them, and to look around and see a church half full of elderly people. I kind of keep an eye on my church. It hasn't got to that point with Prince of Peace, but it's scary to think that's what could happen everywhere down the road, and it seems to be a trend heading that way.
Yeah, and as a pastor, I've seen that quite a bit, and it's something that we've tried to really, we have an aggressive ministry in our church at Cornerstone in Hanover to children, to, we have a wonderful van ministry. My son-in-law, Pastor Josh Hirschberger, who's also an attorney in Madison.
Hello, Josh.
Hey, Josh. Yeah, he also, he has a great passion for the kids and the young people in our society. And I see personally, it's getting more and more difficult, it seems, to reach young people. But it's something that we are doing as a church, and we know that there are other churches that are also seeing the value of doing all that we can to reach this generation, because it seems as if we're losing them to secular humanism and to, we saw what happened in this election, and I know that a lot of the younger electorate went a different direction than what we would have liked.
Yeah, and it's like we've said many times, when you see totalitarian governments, when they end up pretty much banning religion, because the state becomes the people's god. And, people can laugh at that and say, well, you're crazy, that's not going to happen here. But I'm telling you what, it's heading that way, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. It's, it's an indication, and you touched on it earlier, we desperately need a revival in this land. We know that that's the ultimate answer for America. I know that people hear that over and over again, but a renewal that has to take place, where we understand, that God has to be valued again. We need to put God up. I think that one of the biggest things I see in our families, and why people have a difficult time being faithful to church and faithful to the things of God, is they have a low value of God. So how do we get God up there where he needs to be? He's supreme, he's Lord, and he needs to be number one. Well, we need to obviously just promote the supremacy of Jesus Christ, and we need to exalt his name. The salvation is through Christ, and that he needs to be number one and lifted up again. But with our society and with the satanic trends and the various things that are pulling for the attention of our youth, it's a great challenge today. We're reminded that we are truly living the last days according to prophecy.
And like I said with Father Charles, a lot of the people that think Obamacare is a good thing, some of them are the best, most religious people besides that, great Catholics, except for that. And I think they got blinders on as to what is happening, and it's greatly disturbing. I do want to say another way to get this thing turned around is people. I mean, we've got good people like you standing up, the Grody brothers. I mean, they're suing the government because they're Catholic and they don't want Obamacare. Well, there's a lot of probably family-run businesses, Catholics, that feel the same way that they do, but maybe they just don't have the wherewithal to take that extra step to try to stop it. And we need more Grodys across the country, more Mike Johnsons, and more Rick Bruces to step up and do something about it.
That's right. I have great respect for Grody Industries and Mr. Grody and the incredible stand he's taken. Last week we read the letter, that was being promoted around, and there's some of the local churches that were very concerned, and they just wanted to encourage us to support him and to realize how much we need to, as Christians, be an encouragement to him and thank him for the stand he's taking on all our behalf, and the fight that he's involved in is something we certainly need to pray for him, and we need to realize it's right here in our community, and we're going to see this over and over again. Well,
they are definitely dedicated. And on the same note, I do want to say Father Chris Craig has been a champion in our church. He's really stood up and said some things at Mass. He had people clapping about a month ago. I wrote a letter to the editor about it. He made a statement about Obamacare, how we need to vote our conscience, and people gave him a standing ovation. And I was thinking, boy, I mean, the Catholics are going to destroy the president in the election, and it didn't happen. So, but I do want to give a shout out to Chris Craig, Father Chris Craig. I think he's been ill the last couple of days, and maybe that's why he couldn't make it tonight. Wish you could be here, but really appreciate what you're doing.
This is Rick and Rick at Night, the voice of liberty here in the Ohio River Valley, and we'd like to thank, we're really blessed by Pastor Mike Johnson of Cornerstone Baptist Church in Hanover for being here. Pastor, are you, I asked the Father Charles, I said, are you optimistic, pessimistic, or are you just kind of hanging in there right now?
Well, you know, when the results of the election took place, obviously I was very, very saddened and disappointed, and certainly, but obviously we look to the Word of God as Christians and as pastors, and we realize that our hope is in the Lord, and we do know, as you mentioned, God is a sovereign Lord, and so we trust Him for what's taken place. But I do believe that oftentimes God gives people up to their own desires, and I think that's what we've seen happening here. I do believe, though, that what it's done is it's just energized me more to be more outspoken, and for our people to be more energized to see that this nation's worth fighting for, and we obviously have an uphill battle ahead, but we need to realize that our hope is in the Lord and in His promises, and we know that ultimately the Bible says that we would that in the last days things would take place, great suffering and hardships and difficulties, and certainly we don't want to see that in the lives of our children, our grandchildren. We hope that that's something that yet to come, but it may be our generation that experiences a lot more of the difficulties that the Bible talks about. So I'm hopeful. I'm very optimistic in the promises of God, and I'm reminded that I do all I can to reach people for Jesus Christ in these last days.
And you've done a very effective witness. I know just about every Tea Party we've had you at, or Josh, we certainly appreciated you. About a year ago we had Dr. Larry Arnn from Hillsdale on, and I brought up the biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas, and and people don't like hearing this, but it seems like we go down this same parallel course they went through 80 years ago. And the latest, and we talked about Obamacare, but part of that is the electronic medical record that follows you all over the place, and the fact that we're going to have this chip that's either implanted or we get to carry with us or whatever, that scares the daylights out of me. And one of the things, very convenient and all that stuff, but way back when the Germans kept records out the kazoo. They had records of all these kids that were crippled. They had all the old people with infirmities and all that stuff. And lo and behold, after World War II started on September 1st, 1939, 2 weeks later they started rounding up some of these folks. They go to the special hospitals, and the kids didn't make it, and they came back, they died of pneumonia or tuberculosis. And the older people, I'm sitting there going, oh, this medical records thing's a really good deal. I want to sign up right now. No thanks. but it's just amazing to me. But we're in a game we can't win, but we're going to try to win it anyway. And I figure, God's there, God's up to it. The propaganda of the media, other than WIKI and Tom running the whole ship here. But
thank the Lord for Tom. All right.
I get into a quandary when I read I think it's in Romans, as far as God institutes government, even rotten governments. And I think when Paul wrote Romans, it was during the time of Nero. Not when the great government, but God instituted it. I'm having a hard time going along, right-hand kingdom, left-hand kingdom. Can you help me? Can you help the listeners out there that are struggling like I am?
I know exactly what you're feeling, because I've been there too, and it's just been, it's very, very difficult. But the reality is, you think about all the oppressive rulers that the Lord had to deal with, that the different individuals had to deal with in the Bible. You think about Pharaoh, and I had a Christian man the other day who told me that that's one of the things that comforted him. He said, if God can take care of Pharaoh, in the days of Joseph and with the oppressive things that were taking place with the people and the famine in the land, and how God used Joseph in the Old Testament, and despite that, God's always specializes. He can use obviously evil kings as well as those who are righteous kings. And we know, though, that that the Word of God is very clear about these things, and we know that the Lord, even through suffering and trials and difficulties, God is faithful, God is righteous, and God is merciful. And we just have to see him in all of this. And we've got to realize that, this is a time for us to stand. It's a time for us to stand upon the Word of God and do all we can to love our families, to influence others for Christ. And you think about what happened at Sandy Hook and at that elementary school. We just need to really show the love of Christ to others and do all we can, one by one, to influence others. And that's what I appreciate about you guys. We obviously, the election didn't go well. It went very poorly as far as I'm concerned. But I believe, I'm trusting in God. I'm trusting in the Word of God. I'm trusting in His Word. I certainly don't trust the Republican Party or what have you, and I am a conservative through and through. And I believe that we, as pastors, need to take a more aggressive stand. But we need to stand on the Word. We need to stand upon His promises. And Romans chapter 1, as you mentioned, Romans 14, and some of the scriptures in the Bible. That's where our hope comes. That's where my hope is. It lies in Him.
This is another huge test. As a kid, I watched the Ten Commandments, and and the people would see the miracles, and miracle after miracle, parting of the Red Sea, and yet they still strayed. Once given to their own vices, they strayed from God, even though they had seen miracles. So this is just another test, and some of us got to step up, and we got to pass the test. And I heard a guy on the radio the other day said, well, Romney didn't win the election, but maybe God's saying, it's not going to be that easy, people. I'm going to make it a little harder for you. You really need to reawaken and come back to me.
That's it. That's so true, Rick. And I believe that, you think about what this is all about. This is all about choice. They try to make it, here there's, so oftentimes it's emphasized that, there needs to be choice. But we're not being given a choice here. We're told, hey, there's this mandate. We have to comply. They give some, we're going to give you a year to comply. But there's no choice as far as we're concerned. And that's what's interesting about this. And yet, it's so important to them, but our choice is being stifled. Well, we understand that with this, the oppressive direction of our government, all we can do as Christians is we just need to continue to be involved. We need to continue to pray and seek the Lord's face, and we need to continue to be actively involved politically. We really do. Not give up hope, but just do all we can to bend the ear of our legislators and do all we can to stand for life.
Mike, if you look throughout history, more bad, evil things have been done to people, to countries, under the pretense of we're going to do this to take care of you, make your life better. And it's never worked out that way. Our country was so great because it was self-determination.
Right.
You were going to make of yourself what you were determined to do. And if you decided you didn't want to do anything, well, you were going to suffer. But if you wanted to do something, you worked hard, you could make something of yourself. And we're going down that path of all the failed governments throughout history. It's right there for everybody to see. We're doing the same thing.
It's like we've not learned it all from history. It's just unbelievable to me.
And there was a guy that said history
repeats
people
itself.
that don't
George
know history.
Santayana.
That's right.
You know it.
George Santayana. And Martin Niemöller said, first they came for the communists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then I came for the Jews and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Catholic. Then they came for the Baptists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Baptist. Then they came for the Lutherans and there weren't a lot left. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. We got to wake up, boys and girls.
That's right.
And we do appreciate, Pastor Mike being here. God's going to lead us out of this.
And I want to say, Pastor Mike, you have been right out in front with us. And when you do what we do, you set yourself up for ridicule by certain people. And I got to the point where I didn't care. I know you can't be all things to all people.
No.
And if you're going to stand up for what you believe in, you're going to tick some people off. And there's probably some people out there saying, "What's Pastor Mike doing on that show with those two crazy guys?" But I'm so proud to have gotten to know you. And I know your mom told me that she was very proud of you too. I said, "Man, your son really stands for something." And she about started crying, but she knew what I was talking about.
Hopefully, she's listening live out in California because I think they're touring. You got relatives out there?
That's right, Southern California. They're in the Fullerton area right now with my brother. And they went Colorado, actually Illinois, Colorado, and now California. World travelers.
That'll work.
And I thank the Lord for my wonderful parents, and I thank the Lord for my precious wife, my family. You know, I think about the incredible support I have and encouragement, and the opportunity I have to preach the Word of God to people, to share God's truth each and every time. You know, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. What an incredible opportunity it is to share His truth. And we're just reminded that the Word of God will not return void. You know, no matter. And there are a lot of times I wonder, you know, is anybody out there hearing? But I know that God's Word is faithful, and it will always do the work.
There are a lot of people hearing. There really are. I mean, there are people that are hearing us.
That's right.
And it'll turn around. It has to.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, we've got to come to the end of the show. It's a week before Christmas, and we wish all of our listeners and everybody in Madison and across the country, because we're on the web, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. May God grant our country a return to Him and away from the tyranny which now rules our land. We'd like to thank our friend Tom for working the board. And we're going to go over to the Boneyard Grill after all this. And Charlie, tell us a pour one. But any final thoughts, Rick?
Well, I just want to say thanks again to Pastor Mike and to Father Charles, and another shout out to Father Chris Craig. I'm proud that you're my priest, and I hope you're feeling better.
That about wraps it up for the Rick and Rick show for 2012. I got the year right. I blew it on.
It's been 2 years now.
Yeah,
about 2 years.
Yeah, but I blew it as far as what the year was. The last show, because I was so pumped up.
And I didn't even call you on it.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Madison. God bless and keep you all. Good night.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of Wagon Wheel Broadcasting, WIKI Radio, its management, employees, or advertisers. Paid for by the Rick and Rick at Night Show.
From Owen County to Jennings County, we're your home for country favorites, local news, and local sports. 95.3 WIKI, Carrollton, Madison.